Tonight, I'm going to be talking about creating a cooperative community. And
Shit.
yeah, it skipped one of them. Anyhow, I'm Strand. I'm Strand at Jigsaw. I'm strapped on Twitter, and the bit.ly links for this talk are bit.ly/ccc-simp for the simple version, which just shows you the slides that are behind me, and bit.ly/ccc-comp for the complete version, which shows all of my notes. This is a talk about creating a cooperative community because I believe Jigsaw should be a co-op. And I believe this because of many of our values and because of my intuition. The values that inform me on this are we're all about respect, openness, safety, we're about collaboration, and ownership for, or ownership of and responsibility for our community. But before I get into any of that, I want to talk about intuition. I think that good intuition is both non-obvious and non-trivial, and my intuition is this. One of the best forms of organization for any makerspace and the best form for Jigsaw Renaissance is a cooperative. This presentation is an opportunity for me to explain and defend that intuition, but before I can talk about becoming a co-op, I need to talk about how spaces have been organized, why wikis work, and what it's like to live in the future. So, how makerspaces have organized so far follow three models. We've got the private workshop, the benevolent dictatorship, and the collective. The private workshop is generally for-profit or generally close to the public. These spaces are interesting and potential allies, but we don't have enough in common with them to use their structures as a model for ours. The benevolent dictatorship is a space where most of the funds come from one person, and it can be a cult of personality. It's completely undemocratic. Whoever funds the project gets to make all the decisions, but it can be very open to new members. But they aren't interested in sharing ownership. Since they're dependent on one or few people, their longevity is dependent on the interest or lifespan of the founder. And then the third type is the collective, which is completely democratic, and it can be drama heavy. It distributes the costs evenly, which is a really nice quality. This model is the closest to what I envision Jigsaw becoming. However, most collectives require complete consensus in decision making, and one member can block decisions that they don't like. Collectives, in my opinion, are unlikely to grow past 100 members. So most hacker spaces are really good at attracting like-minded people, but they're not very good at finding people who don't think like them. Collectives will have difficulty with scalability and reproducibility. Past a certain size, making decisions with a total consensus is near impossible, and since the personalities of the founding members shape the success of collectives, it's difficult to recreate a similar organization elsewhere. And I found this quote from Wikipedia to be very telling. Cooperatives are closely related to collectives, which differ only in that profit-making or economic stability is placed secondary to adherence of social justice principles in collectives. Citation needed. I assume that most of the members of Jigsaw don't want to vote on every issue and would prefer to elect representatives to regularly make day-to-day admin decisions. In theory, a collective could choose to have a representative system of self-governance, and a cooperative could require no dissent to approve decisions, but it's not something I've heard of in practice. Cooperatives also tend to be focused on economically benefiting their membership, and collectives do not necessarily focus on benefiting their memberships economically. So what do we need to achieve our goals right now? I think what we need are bylaws. Whatever form we take, we're going to need bylaws because written rules trump unwritten rules. We need bylaws because without them, we cannot improve our adhocracy. We are an adhocracy, and adhocracies are made possible by better network communication, aka the internet. I believe in the concept that given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow, which comes from the cathedral and the bazaar. Given the increased communication efficiency made possible by the internet, most problems will be solved by smart participants with little organizational guidance. In the 90s, this concept was new, but today we sometimes call it crowdsourcing. By making an organization larger and getting more people involved, you make your bugs shallower. So since all bugs are shallow, why do we need bylaws? Bylaws are created to make common bugs trivial. They have three audiences. The first is outside organizations, like governments, corporations, and other spaces. Bylaws give the outside organizations a sense of how we make decisions. Outside individuals are the second audience. These are other makers and folks without an inclination or ability to join. They might be geographically distant, whatever. Bylaws give outside individuals a layout of how they can participate, even if they're trying to participate from the moon. Participants, which is everyone in this room, that's the third audience. Bylaws give participants permission to act and guidelines on how to act. Bylaws are written in legalese and appease to outside organizations. They're made publicly available to encourage outside individuals, and they reflect the culture and values of the organization to guide participants. Because bylaws are primarily written for an outside audience, insiders have little impetus to craft them. However, writing our own bylaws is like writing our own job description. If we do it right, we get to do all the things we like and none of the things we hate. And we'll be the organization we prefer, not fitting into anyone else's mold. I don't want a glut of new rules. I want to get rid of unwritten rules. When most rules are unwritten, admins have to use their judgment with every decision. That can be very exhausting. Written rules guide admins through common problems and reserve judgment for the exceptions. Bylaws are one form of written rule. Guidelines can be another. So we said before that we're a physical wiki. What does that mean? Well, there's no rule telling members, do not build a fort in the middle of the common area, because that rule would be dumb. But guidelines on space usage are smart. We call ourselves a physical wiki, but Wikipedia has 1,000-fold more written rules than we do. One of the most important rules they have is ignore all rules. This is not the same as there are no rules. It gives users the permission to reconfigure without lawyering. Wikipedia has rules to counteract disruptive behavior from folks following ignore all rules, including do not disrupt Wikipedia to illustrate a point. Good rules guide behavior, giving permission to follow established patterns. They also allow exceptions and allow folks to exercise judgment around the exceptions. Does creating bylaws mean getting rid of our adhocracy? No. Does becoming a cooperative mean getting rid of our adhocracy? No. What it means is getting rid of unwritten rules to clarify how we accomplish tasks, goals, and projects at Jigsaw. So I want to talk about where and when we are, and where and when we are is the present moment, the future. We live in a fantastic time. Everything is amazing, and no one is happy. And I think that makerspaces have the means to make people happy again. Makerspaces are newish, and I expect a flourish of spaces to blossom in the next decade. But at the same time, I expect many spaces to never start. A rough estimate of the spaces I've come across on hackerspace.org indicates that about 80% of them are in the planning stages without a space. Of these, I expect greater than 80% of them to fizzle before they ever start. Makerspaces asphyxiate without space. We've jumped that hurdle. Makerspaces are of this moment. They're being jump-started by three trends from the last 3 decades: network effects, Moore's Law, and a renewed desire for community. We are now in a time whose ideas have come, and the 3 ideas that I think are integral to our success are openness, scalability, and reproducibility. Today, openness is cheap, but it's not always recognized as a virtue. I believe it should be a core principle of Jigsaw because openness allows outsiders to see in, it allows newcomers to change who we are, and it creates goodwill and encourages good acts. And with regard to scalability, I think that what we are at 50 members is neat, but what we will be at 100 members is, say, 4 times as neat, and what we'll be at 500 members could be 100-fold as neat. And the reason I believe this is the number of connections and conversations you can have with 50 people is about 4 times as less as the number of connections and conversations you can have with 100. The downside of this is conflicts will grow as the space grows. So we have to anticipate the problems of an organization that's roughly double our size.